Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fully Charged Show podcast. Now, there's a lovely man in England called Adam Buxton who's been doing a podcast for years. It's wonderful. He has amazing guests on it. He's a very good and entertaining interviewer, and he covers a huge wide range of subjects. And what he tends to do is he goes out for a walk with his dog and introduces the guest, and then you actually hear the interview with the guest that takes place, it used to take place in a studio, now takes place over Zoom. So this week's episode of the Fully Charged Plus podcast is the exact opposite of that. I'm recording this opening message in my studio, but we actually recorded the episode that you're going to hear in a moment when we were out for a walk. So now I'll introduce who I was out for a walk with after I say, please do subscribe to the Fully Charged Plus podcast, which is the most boring thing everybody says on their wretched podcast, but it does make a big difference to us. That's all I'm saying. So then you won't miss out any more episodes, just in case. And you know, it's very easy to do. You know how to do it on your podcast app. This week's guest, Fiona Howarth, has been on the Fully Charged Show podcast before, quite a long time ago. In fact, that time we recorded an episode, if I remember correctly, at the Hay the Hay Literacy Festival, which I was invited to attend to learn how to read and write. No, the Hay Literature Festival in Hay-on-Wye on the Welsh borders in the United Kingdom. And that was and so what Fiona does is she runs Octopus Electric Vehicles. So they're doing amazing work, which we will discuss in this podcast, with variable tariffs and ways of allowing electric vehicle owners to charge their cars, sometimes for nothing, sometimes for less than nothing, actually be paid to charge their cars. Really interesting to listen to what Octopus are doing. This is quite a wide-ranging, rambling podcast. As we went for a beautiful walk, we met halfway between where we both live. So I live about 100 miles outside London, and I drove roughly 55 miles towards London and met in a village that I can't remember what it was called. Lovely area in the Chilterns. And Fiona drove out of London, and we met in a pub car park and went for a long walk. And then we couldn't have a meal in the pub because we hadn't booked 8 months in advance. So we had a lemonade in the garden and then went on our merry way. So it was a really delightful day of walking. But before we ramble into the rambling podcast, here is a lovely message from our fantastic sponsor that makes this podcast possible. Okay, let us, without more ado, dive straight in. Fiona Howarth from Octopus Electric Vehicles, stumbling through the woods in the Chilterns. Enjoy. My Energy is putting the I back into British innovation. My Energy is putting the I back into inventing the future. My Energy is putting the I back into inspiring a nation. Recharging the world with green, smart energy. Charge your EV with your PV and more. Visit myenergy.com and help to spark the green revolution. My Energy, driving the charge to a greener future. I'm so envious of you having an understanding of things like economic models and finance models. Because people say I've done podcasts about salary sacrifice, and while I'm hearing it, I understand it. And then if someone asks me 10 minutes later, can you explain salary sacrifice? Okay, yeah. You don't pay as much. That's about as good as I can.
Yeah, I mean, it's
I haven't got that ability to hold on to that.
It's funny. It's just the easiest bit is it comes out of your pre-tax salary.
Yes.
So the cost for your car, the monthly cost for your car, out of your pre-tax salary. Yeah. So you benefit from income tax and national insurance. So let's say £500 for a Model 3 every month. That comes out of your gross salary. So instead of paying income tax and national insurance, which might be 30-40%, maybe £200 of that you would give away, that's now going towards your car. So what would have been, say, £300 in your pocket is now £500 worth of car.
Right, yes.
And what that also means is so you can get that benefit in terms of insurance and servicing and maintenance and all your monthly car costs, which is pretty exciting.
But I mean, I think what the other, because I really want to talk to you about Octopus's EV. Well, I mean, that is part of what you're talking about. I do accept that. But the models that are starting to emerge now, even from major manufacturers and their way they're operating, and it's the first inklings of transport or mobility as a service, is how it's often described. But you know that you don't necessarily buy and own a car.
Yeah.
That you have access to them.
It's the Spotify meets cars.
It is, and I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of drawbacks to that model. I'm sure it's not, but I think those models are, potentially very interesting because there is it's becoming more and more discussed in my weird circle of communications, of comments and Twitters about that. It's an unsustainable model to have 32 million private cars on the road, which is what we have at the moment in this country.
Yeah, it's an interesting one for me. I think there's two different versions of this. One which is you take a vehicle on a certain amount of months, and it might be a rolling monthly basis, like a subscription model. It might be on a 2, 3, 4 year contract. And that's kind of one version of it, compared to, say, car sharing.
Yeah.
And actually that first one might not actually reduce the number of vehicles we have on the road all the time, because it still means that a family or a property might still have a car.
Right.
So that's not going to reduce it, but it does offer other benefits to the user, such as flexibility.
Yeah.
They don't have to worry about, say, servicing and maintenance because it's kind of taken care of for them.
Yeah.
They can upgrade their car to the latest and greatest model a couple of years later, or if their circumstances change. So all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the car sharing, for example, can, but might not suit everyone. So, for example, I've got 2 kids, I've got car seats in the car.
Yeah.
And it totally depends on your car usage and how often you need it. So I've still got friends at the minute that don't need a car often. So they are much more likely to be renting or car sharing, even with the kids, because it's not very regular that they need to put the car seats in or whatever.
Yeah.
So they're willing to make that kind of sacrifice in convenience because it's not very often.
Yeah.
That definitely takes more cars off the road. But if you're doing it all the time, then it's just much more convenient. But you're right, that the kind of in their 20s, generation, fantastic. Yeah, the thing for me also is that kind of, that case for compensating people for letting us use their batteries actually, and supporting the grid, and actually the amount that we can save. So I think Ofgem a few years ago estimated that we'd save about 40 billion, up to 40 billion, by creating a smart energy system.
Wow.
So
the British economy.
The British economy,
save £40 billion.
And that was just on the infrastructure. So that doesn't take into account, for example, the lower amount of generation that we'd need to put in place as well. So that, if you think about it, there's the infrastructure, the grid that we're using at different times, and whether we can maximise the use of that during off-peak times rather than peak times, so that we don't have to put in loads more copper in the ground, for example, to be able to support the grid more at peak times. Yeah. Now, we will have to put in some, but it's how much more we'd have to put in place.
Right.
So let's imagine, I don't know, the stats I often use, I probably shared these with you before, but by 2030 we expect 10 or 11 million electric vehicles on the road.
Right.
Now, if they all got home from work or wherever it was and plugged in their car on a home charger, a 7 kilowatt charger, at the same time, in peak time around about 5 p.m, which is peak time, then that would be, 70 or 77 gigawatts of consumption just to that point.
More than we've ever.
That's more than our peak consumption. So we'd double that peak consumption. And that's only 2030. Obviously, we're expecting more on the road by 2040, 2050. And so we'd have to have more generation at that stage, as well as that infrastructure supporting more. So actually, if we can save up to 40 billion on the infrastructure, that sounds pretty good. And then also on the generation side as well, and not having to have some of that on-demand generation, but more of the kind of renewable generation, like wind power, that we can capture when the wind is blowing, essentially, and then we can use it at those other times.
But the thing I can't help thinking about is, because I think this is when it gets really fascinating, I think once you go over 10 million electric vehicles that could be connected by low power, not 50 kilowatt bi-directional, but by 7 kilowatts,
Well, that's it.
But I mean, if you took 1 kilowatt hour out of 10 million cars at peak time, which is like 4 or 5 miles range. It's nothing. You barely notice it.
Yeah.
I can't do the maths. Tell me how much that is. How many kilowatt hours is 10 million? 10 million kilowatt hours is
10 million kilowatt hours. Yeah. So if you just reverse that calculation that I was just doing there.
Yeah.
So there are all of those in that hypothetical situation were plugged in a 7 kilowatt charger.
Yeah.
And so those 10 million were consuming in that point
Right.
70
gigawatts.
70 gigawatts.
Oh right. If you send it the other way.
That's 70 gigawatts going back into the grid.
Which you would never need. I mean.
Well, and actually that's more than our peak demand.
Yes.
So actually, right at that point, all of our homes and businesses can go off grid.
Yes.
Because
You don't need any generating capacity.
we don't need any generating
No.
capacity because we can just use the electricity from the
Yeah.
cars. I remember actually, I was saying earlier how I came back
for an
into...
hour. I mean, I think it's important to say it's not like for a month.
Oh no, well, this is actually what I was going to say, but
all right.
actually in your battery might be anywhere between a, say, 30 kilowatt hour battery and a 100 kilowatt hour
Yeah.
battery. So if you're consuming, let's say my battery at the minute, I've probably got about 50 kilowatt hours in
Yes.
that battery at the minute. So actually at the 77 kilowatt rate that we were saying, that's going to keep me going for 8 hours.
Right.
So actually it's not just a single hour, but it is multiple hours.
Yeah.
I think I've done that wrong.
That sounds.
I know.
Sounds good to me.
But so the point is actually that. so it's true that would support my allocation for the grid. Actually, for those 8 hours, the reality is that as a house we don't consume 7 kilowatts. So if my car was just supporting me as a house,
Yeah.
it would actually support my house for like 5 days.
Right.
That
Because you're
kind
not
of thing.
using exactly. You're not drawing that much.
Yeah, I don't draw at a
Yeah.
rate of 7 kilowatts.
If you had your water heating on, electric central heating, the oven cooking, you might be straining it a bit.
Well, so
You
I
know,
worked out the first Tesla that I came across. I was sharing earlier that the person that made me realise that EVs had come of age about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
They were driving a Tesla at the time, which I think was a 65 or 75 kilowatt hour battery.
Right.
I remember getting home that evening and Googling, and that battery would have lasted a typical home five days.
Yes.
A typical UK home. So you're right, with electric heating, it's probably going to drop it down, but
Yeah.
it's still a significant
It's still a
amount.
huge chunk. Yeah. I mean, that's because I find that the disruptive element of the technology that has emerged in the last 10 years equally terrifying and exciting. Because I mean, not terrifying, but like it really throws the business models out the window. You know, the old one. If you're EDF or British Gas and you generate electricity in that big thing that you paid for,
Yeah.
and that sends it along wires that have been put in, and that goes to someone's house. It's such a simple model.
Interestingly, the biggest challenge I think is for the DNOs, or the distributed network operators. Those
Right.
local grids, those local grid systems that actually make sure that the electricity is getting to your house.
Yes.
So, like energy suppliers, typically are buying it wholesale and making sure they've got enough to cover, their customer base, and then it gets settled by clever central systems over the next few weeks after that happens. But these local grids, they're doing it on a half hour by half hour basis, for example,
Right.
and they don't have as much data as to what's going on a specific street and so forth, and so they just want to make sure the lights don't go out. So
Yeah.
actually, the simplest way for them to do is just spend money and put the copper in the ground.
Yeah.
But the harder but smarter way of doing it is to actually put in these smart systems to make it more clever, to bring it into the modern age, to make it clever, and to actually provide pricing signals
Yeah.
that say, actually, in this street or in this area, we've got high consumption right now, so we're going to make it a bit more expensive.
Yeah.
But actually, it's a bit like an Uber system. Actually, it's peak times right now, or even trains.
Yeah.
It's peak times right now. Do you definitely want to be charging your car right now?
Yeah.
If not, then actually don't use it right now because everyone else is,
Yeah.
and it's a bit more expensive, but do it later and it'll be cheaper. Now, you and I don't want to be thinking about that all the time and
No.
going,
I
oh,
do,
what's
'cause
that?
I'm obsessed, but normal people with proper lives.
Are you still looking at your agile tariff?
Every now and then I
Yeah.
might look at it.
I found one out. So for those
No,
listening,
less. I've got a bit calmer about it. It's not every 10 minutes.
this is it. Well, so for those listening, we've got Octopus Agile is a time of use tariff that does follow the wholesale market price. And it changes on a day-by-day basis depending on what's
Fascinating.
going on in terms of the wind blowing,
Yeah.
when the sun's shining, those kind of things, and what's going on in terms of consumption. The first time you get it, those first few days,
Yeah.
I did watch it a lot.
You can't stop, can you? Because it's also you're actually learning a
Yeah.
huge amount about how the energy system in the British Isles works. It's
Yeah.
not even, it's not even your local bit, is it? It's the whole country. Is there a lot of offshore wind coming in at night? Are there lots of people? I mean, and that peak, you just go, why is that peak still there? Why haven't we worked out how to moderate that peak? Because it's ridiculous, and it's always the same.
It's the infrastructure cost as well. There's an infrastructure layer during that section which does contribute to the cost at that point because it's peak time. And so actually between 4 and 7...
everything's being used.
Yeah, and so what we do need to do is like have a more dynamic infrastructure pricing mechanism in the same way that we do for generation, which is... But that does have to probably be more local. And that is harder. So we're working with UK power networks. So on the Power Loop project, Power Loop is our vehicle-to-grid project, where we've got over 100 cars and vehicle-to-grid chargers being installed at people's homes.
Right.
I believe we're into the last 5 spots, actually, which is quite exciting.
Yeah.
And this community is coming up with the people that are on this trial, where they're contributing to helping us develop the product, which is absolutely fantastic.
And can I just quickly ask, at the moment, is the technology restricted to just Nissan Leafs, or have you?
Yeah.
It is still, right.
Yeah.
Which is fair. I mean, that's the car that can do it, you know.
It could be the ENV200 van as well, because that also has the CHAdeMO connector.
Right.
The limitation is that in that CHAdeMO connection and that protocol and how it's the communication there. I do understand there is exciting announcements kind of being made around other car manufacturers doing it, for CCS, which is the alternative to CHAdeMO. And so I'm excited to see those kind of announcements come out. But you're right, to get it more universal, we do need CCS to be able to support V2G as well. It's quite funny, our Director of Tech and Innovation in my team, Claire, in fact, she did the Fully Charged Plus episode with you on Power Loop.
Yes.
She's fantastic, and she loves this as well. And she has, I think, at least 1, if not 2, V2G chargers at home where they're doing a lot of development work and testing the app and trialing the app and trialing the system and all this kind of stuff. And she's now got a heat pump, and she's just turning it into almost an R&D lab in Ipswich, the outskirts of Ipswich.
Right.
And I'm desperate to go up and see it, because she's like now just, I think it's going to become a destination. So.
But that's the when we filmed this week housing development outside Oxford of either carbon neutral or carbon positive homes. So the embedded carbon in the structure outweighed the impact they had of making it. So at the end of the construction process, including the transportation, the extraction, the production of all the materials they used, there was more carbon embedded in that building than there was used to build it, which is
fantastic.
And also it runs on, they build in solar panels in the roof, they have batteries in the houses, they have amazing heating, because they are beyond passive house standards, so they are super sealed, and they have heating that comes in, so their air is constantly changing in the house, but it's warmed or cooled, and that's all run from the solar and all that stuff.
Fantastic.
So an underfloor heating that's electric, so there's only electricity, there's no gas.
Do you see the same uptake and interest in people doing more with their houses once they get an EV?
I mean, the two things are inextricably linked, aren't they? And people have done loads of surveys of that. So when people get solar panels, in the last 10 years they got solar panels, and they look at their diesel SUV and they go, hang on.
I think it just engages people a lot more on it, doesn't it?
Both ways. I think more commonly people get an electric car and they go, why don't I have solar panels and I can charge it for nothing? Theory.
It makes it more real. I think the other thing about EVs is, you know exactly how much your petrol pump, the price that your petrol pump is.
Yeah.
Most people will be able to tell you that. But actually, if you ask people what do they pay per kilowatt hour,
they wouldn't have a clue.
They wouldn't know.
No.
Whereas actually with cars and EVs, people start to know that.
Yeah.
Well, there was the research, wasn't there, that was showing how electric cars, of course, save carbon versus a standard internal combustion engine, depending on how much of the energy comes from renewable sources. And in countries where it's very renewable, it's like a 70% saving over the lifetime of the car.
Yeah.
Versus in the UK, if you just take the average generation mix, then it's about 30-40% saving, I think, was the research. But actually, because we are going renewable, increasingly
that will just go up. I think there was a man I spoke to briefly yesterday, because that happens when you get out of a Tesla. People want to tell you how their diesel is quite good, but he had a legitimate gripe, I think, which was the government set up a tax system and encouraged people very publicly to use diesels, I don't know when it was, 15, 20 years ago, Gordon Brown.
Yeah.
And now it's like, diesels are terrible. You go, that is so unfair. Because, you know, people who aren't interested and aren't bothered, and they see all the adverts and go, oh, this diesel, oh, it's cleaner. Oh, that's good. Oh, less CO2, so less global warming stuff. Oh, that's good, I'll get a big diesel.
I'm fascinated by the fact that we've just kind of got away with it for so long.
Yeah, yeah.
And the other bit that I struggle with is the 40,000 deaths a year in the UK alone from air pollution, and the 20 billion. But the 40,000 deaths every year, and the 20 billion that the NHS is spending to support people that have been impacted by air pollution. And the thing is that if that was coming through our water system,
there would be
national uproar.
Yeah.
You know, we'd never get away with 40,000 deaths every year because the water system wasn't up to scratch. Yeah, the water wasn't clean. Yeah. So there'd be an absolute national uproar. Yeah. But I'm kind of optimistic given I think the key challenge was there was no good alternative. For a long time when the range wasn't there, when there wasn't charging network, all that kind of stuff, there wasn't a good alternative. So there was no ability to encourage people or help people make that switch. Whereas now you see that so different. Yeah. And I think that commitment by the government to the 2030 ban.
It's amazing that it's still holding up, because that's another story we're doing soon, is the amount of lobbying that's going on from the automotive industry and the oil industry. So, I think we should include plug-in hybrids.
Yeah.
Because the ban is 100% no combustion engines. Doesn't matter whether it's a hybrid or a self-charging hybrid or a, magic mushroom hybrid. It can't, so it is electric cars, but there'll be such pressure and there'll be such a long battle.
Well, I think even in the run-up, wasn't there? I believe there was quite a challenge to get it in. So they've got the extension, haven't they, for some hybrids through to 2035.
Oh, have they already done that?
I think that was...
I knew that would happen. It's just inevitable. Because
part of it initially. And so that is just... they are powerful bodies. They're powerful organisations. Yeah. Both in terms of the car manufacturers and the oil and gas manufacturers, and to some extent I can imagine switching over your manufacturing isn't easy.
No.
Right, they take years of planning.
Yeah.
There's a lot that's invested in now across the supply chain as well as the facilities themselves.
I mean, I think it's probably it's easily as challenging as adapting the grid, if not more. I mean, because there is some sort of centralised understanding and infrastructure of the grid, whereas the car industry is, you can't really compare them. But I mean, it's a massive undertaking and the challenges they're facing now.
Yeah.
I think are from China. Really, that's the big.
Yeah.
That's the real big scary thing, because the Chinese are making cars now that are as good as anything made in Europe.
Somebody asked me yesterday if I was to give a message to the car manufacturers, what would it be? And I was saying, don't have your Kodak moment.
No.
Because that's exactly what it is, isn't it? It's like if you don't change quick enough now, then you're just going to miss out. So, and I think I am really pleased to see lots of announcements now in the last, every week at the minute we're seeing a new car manufacturer make that commitment to going fully electric, which is great.
I think I just want to explain, just in case there's some younger listeners, what a Kodak moment is.
Yes, good point.
Well, I don't know, because I think most people our generation, or my generation, would know. Your generation, but there's young people who won't ever have heard of Kodak. Kodak was huge.
My mum has recently moved out of our family house, and she brought me down a bunch of boxes, and in those boxes I had two cameras that had Kodak rolls of film in them, undeveloped.
Wow.
So I should get them developed, but I don't even know where you'd get them developed these days.
Oh, you can still do it.
Yeah. There could be photos there from 20 years ago.
Right, wow.
And my kids were like, wow, what's this?
Wow, yeah, they think it was so cool.
My daughter, she was doing a project at school about old things. Yeah. And so she took one of these cameras in as this thing from the olden days. Yeah, it was a thing from the olden days.
Oh my God.
And I had to explain to her, so this roll of film that you slot into the camera, you take the photos, and then you'd either take it into boots or you send it off to get developed into your photos, and then you'd have your physical photos. And of course, what happened was digital technology came along.
Which Kodak developed. That's a very important. That's the really vital. They worked out digital photography.
No, and so the point for the listeners, of course, is that also that load of car manufacturers have had their hands on electric car technology for years.
Oh yeah.
And fuel cell technology and hydrogen technology.
Yeah.
So I worked for BMW in 2003 doing fuel cell cars.
Right.
And they've been doing it for 20 years at that point.
Wow.
So they've been doing it since the 80s.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's
the
absolute story of hydrogen fuel cell cars. They've been 15 years in the future for my entire life. I saw a film at the Isolde Cinema, which I think was knocked down in the early 1970s. That's how long ago, when I was a child.
Yeah.
Which had a Pathé newsreel of the new Rover hydrogen car. And this is what we'll be driving in 15 years. So that would have been, let's say, 1978 would have been 15 years after that.
Yeah.
And we're now 2021. I've always said, I want it to work.
Yeah.
It's better than diesel or petrol.
It's funny, somebody was saying to me once that people make emotional decisions and then rationally backfill.
Yes.
So
that's exactly it.
And I think it was maybe in the context of property buying.
Yeah.
Which is, you might make your list. Let's say you're thinking about your dream house and you're like, okay, I'd like a garden and I'd like this and I'd like that. I want X number of bedrooms. And maybe you're lucky enough to then go hunting for that dream house. Actually, the reality is you'll probably find one. And then you'll rationally backfill why the fact that it doesn't have that many bathrooms is okay because, we can share. Whatever it is. And then actually the kind of rational stuff it fits in then to work with the narrative so that you can go with your emotional decision.
It's such a hard thing to get that whole world perspective in, which I think, in your position with energy, you would have a hugely wide, how much coal they're burning in Poland or in Germany and whether closing nuclear is good or bad. All those things is our world that we live in, but most people haven't got a clue about all that.
Well, it's so interesting because to some extent it's that same conversation I remember having when I was 16 where, that physics teacher that taught me about burning fossil fuels and so forth. And I just remember saying, well, why do we do that? He said, and he's like, well, it's just because there's an industry that's built up that way and it's cheap. And I was like, but even if it's cheap, if we're going to end up with climate change issues and air pollution problems, they don't seem to be worth it. Why don't we just pay a bit more and go down the renewable route? And he's like, but it just doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way, and we can't switch over consumer behaviour. And people are relatively short-termist.
Right.
And so actually what we do need to do is
That's amazing. You had that conversation with a physics teacher when you were 16. It's brilliant. It'd be great. Have you been back and talked to them?
I went looking for him, but I haven't actually managed to track him down since. But I was saying to somebody the other day as well how influential teachers are. And so how important their role is, and any teachers listening, thank you for what you do, because it really was so important. And actually you realise that what we need to do is we need to find things that fit with our lifestyle that are incrementally better. Yeah. So actually the reality is most people are not going to stop using a car. No. They're not overnight, they're not going to wake up tomorrow and say, do you know what? I'm not going to go and drive to visit my granny or drive and see my mum or whoever it is, or I'm not going to drive my kids to school now. It's like half an hour away and I'm going to make sure I'm going to walk half an hour there and half an hour back with them when actually I want to go and see my mates in, whatever. So people are not going to change their behaviours in that way. And to your point is that there's a much bigger scale thing on the commercial side as well. But actually finding alternatives that are better.
It's really good.
Yeah, exactly. And making it easy. Making it easy to take that choice. Make that choice to do that slightly better thing. Yeah. Always, each time. And so I think that's the thing with, on the energy side, having green energy that can supply your home easily. Yeah. And that's exactly what Octopus is about. It's like, how do we make it easy for you to get green energy at your home? And not just at your home, but actually for your car or, beyond that. And so actually we've obviously got that energy supply, but more recently there's that announcement around the generation side as well. So we're now going into that generation side. So managing a portfolio of, I think it's up to £3 billion worth of renewable energy assets. And actually now we can start to balance them and do smart things with that dynamic energy system we were talking about earlier, and just continue to grow and to push and make it as easy as possible for people to make switches and make decisions that are better. You see a lot of financial organisations now looking for greener investment opportunities.
Right. And I can't believe they're doing that. They might say they're doing it because we care about the planet, all that.
Yeah, I think there's various things. I think because it's also coming from pensions, and people are looking for funds, clean growth funds to put their pension money into. Like I'm looking for that right now, and I've been doing research to try and find a good fund that's ethical and green that I want to.
Yeah, because I have an ethical fund, and I know it's not armaments or fossil fuels, but I sometimes worry what else it is.
Yeah, and how do you know? And I guess and actually there's only a limited number of investments sometimes in that space, so they're always looking for those kind of investments, which is absolutely the great kind of incentive for them. But so we've been speaking with banks, right? Because we've started this leasing company. Yeah, and so we've got customers that would like to take electric vehicles, and of course we needs some funding basically to fund those electric vehicles, so that we can then lease them out to the customers. And we're getting really good response.
Right.
Really good response from banks that are genuinely excited about an opportunity to invest in green technology and to get behind EVs.
Because I'm presuming you're getting a fairly good response from people who might want to release a car through you. Are you getting?
Yeah, the interest has been fantastic.
Right. But I mean, on the flip, so that I kind of assumed anyway. But the flip side of that is, if there's interest
you're essentially bringing together people with funding.
Yeah.
So that we can finance those vehicles and then lease them out to those people that would like to lease one. Basically, long-term hire a car. So for 2, 3, or 4 years, you get your nice vehicle, and often on salary sacrifice, or business contract hire. And so in that scenario, you're like, okay, well, who are those people that are going to be funding the cars? Where's the money coming from? And I think it's so positive to see big banks. We've gone with Close Brothers in the first instance. So Close Brothers are the first bank that we partnered with on the leasing company. But there are other banks as well that are very, very positive around this green space, and that's so exciting. Greg, who's the Octopus Energy Group CEO, Greg Jackson, he is so high energy, and it's there's kind of like two speeds. it's like now or never, and so if we're doing it, let's do it and do it right now. So there's no hanging about. There's no should we, shouldn't we. It's like, yeah, great, let's do it. And it's like, well, should we? I'd really like a tariff, Greg, for EV drivers. Yeah. And he's like, okay, what would you like, Fiona? I'm like, well, I'm thinking what we should do is really maximise that cheap electricity in the middle of night, have a tariff where we could have low pricing overnight. And I remember just having very brief conversations with him. And within a couple of weeks, we had Octopus Go up and running. And in fact, that's right, because it was just before Fully Charged. I was like, do you know, it'd be fantastic if we could launch this in like 4 weeks at Fully Charged Live. Yeah. And this is going back 2018, was that your first?
First one was 2018.
So it was then. So I was like, I'd really like to launch it in about 4 weeks at Fully Charged Live. And he was like, great, yeah, go for it. And so we worked out the processes and the system. We were lucky that the platform that the Octopus Energy tech team had created is so flexible that we could do that very quickly.
Because I can imagine that could be hugely complex. Yeah. I mean, it would have been like 20 years ago.
Well, I worked in other energy companies, and with those systems, they weren't set up that way. Yeah. They couldn't break down the day into different portions of the day. They could maybe support an Economy 7 tariff or an Economy 10 tariff, but this kind of concept of having a different time zone or different period, was very foreign, and particularly Agile was very foreign. But actually, the Kraken platform is what it's called, the Octopus Energy Kraken platform, has just enables all of that. Right. So actually, Good Energy have now set up on the Kraken platform too. So they're starting to see some more innovative tariffs come out of Good, which is fantastic as well. And then E.ON have taken the Kraken platform as well. And actually, I think it's supporting now over 17 million customers. Wow. Across the different providers that have taken that platform, which for me is, it's like a playground, kind of innovation playground for me, where you can then start to hopefully see more innovation come out, where you can play tunes and that. If you imagine a kind of old world of managing traffic and managing maybe a taxi platform, a taxi business, right? You might have had a central HQ where they were like coordinating different cars to go to different places and coordinating directly with the customers and all that. All on phones and notes and, a kind of central system. Actually, we've now got Uber, which is much more distributed. Yeah. And actually, if you think about our energy system, we've still got a much more central system at the minute where we've got people in National Grid, for example, and system operator with their big screens. It looks pretty cool. Yeah. But actually, we could make it much more distributed and much more local, and kind of how do we go to a much more modern, data-driven energy system as well. I think
I want to defend the National Grid a
little
bit.
They do a brilliant job. I'm not.
And they're very open to that sort of innovation, though. I think.
Absolutely. I don't think they're anything they do is wrong. I think they do a fantastic job, and they're working on a number of innovation projects with us and with other players in the market, pushing towards a smart energy system. So it's just the historical setup of our energy system in a non-digital world. It's just where we are, and therefore it's like, how with them are we going to move forward?
They've inherited a sort of 1950s grid, which is when the kind of National Grid really rolled out. And where we live, our house was didn't have electricity until the mid-1950s. Yeah. Which is, when you think about it, because I was born in the mid-1950s, it doesn't seem that long ago, but that was the fact that you could live something here, probably around here, probably didn't have electricity till then.
Yeah.
You know, they would still have had oil lamps.
It's amazing, isn't it, actually, just that concept?
Yeah, so, 70 years ago, I suppose.
Yeah.
By 70 years ago, probably pretty much the whole country would have been electrified. But I just want to say thank you very much for coming for a lovely walk in the Chilterns.
What a pleasure.
We thought it was the most unstructured waffle, but I think within that there are nuggets of interesting data.
Yeah, and we had our own non-Kodak moment with the camera. Lovely photo of us here sitting, enjoying the sun.
Yeah. And it's gone sunny now, which is very nice. So we're very lucky.
I did mean to say on the Kodak moment bit.
Oh, yeah.
The reason for calling it a Kodak moment was, of course, their tagline. Because for those people that won't have known about Kodak, they wouldn't know the phrase Kodak moment.
Oh, I see, yes.
So your Kodak moment was your capturing of the photo, capturing of the moment.
Photograph, yeah.
Anyway, but yes, what a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Well, I really hope you enjoyed that. I hope you. There was one or two times when we went severely off topic, as you can hear, but it was a really pleasant thing to do. We're going to do it again. We want to do more stuff with Octopus because what they're doing is revolutionary, and the software that backs up their stuff, the various tariffs that they've introduced, is being used by electricity companies now all over the world. It is an extraordinary story. Anyway, that's all. Make sure you do check out the Fully Charged Show on YouTube. Loads of episodes coming there. There'll be another episode next week. Equally informative and entertaining, I hope. And that's it, as always. If you have been, thank you for listening.